shake the very ground of everything we've been taught about creation. Because hidden deep within the ancient Ethiopian texts, far older and less altered than many Western scriptures, there are whispers of a man who existed in divine form before his body ever touched the earth. A man who was not just the beginning of humanity, but the memory of something far greater. Imagine that for a moment. Adam, not as the first human, but as a being of light shaped in the presence of celestial watchers, carrying a purpose that predated the world itself. The Western Bible begins with, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," but the Ethiopian texts hint at another layer, a spiritual realm that existed before this material one, where Adam's soul was already alive. In those sacred writings, creation wasn't sudden. It was intentional, layered, and filled with mystery. And that mystery might explain why humanity has always felt like it's searching for something it has forgotten. People today scroll endlessly through history, archaeology, and ancient myth videos, driven by a single hunger to know who we truly are and where we really came from. The Western story of Adam and Eve gives us a start, but only a surface. The Ethiopian texts go deeper. They describe divine councils, heavenly beings, and a pre-earth Adam who once stood among them. They describe light and matter, separating not once, but twice, first in the heavens, then on the earth. And somewhere in that divine unfolding, Adam's existence began. It's strange, isn't it? How every culture has a creation story, and yet they all seem to echo fragments of the same lost truth. What if those echoes point back to the same origin? An origin preserved not in Rome, not in London, but in the sacred mountains of Ethiopia. There the ancient Gaia's manuscripts, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the lesser-known texts like the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan reveal a side of creation most of the world has never been allowed to see. They speak of Adam before Eden, before the fall, before even time as we understand it began. These aren't just stories. They're testimonies from a forgotten era, records of a people who preserved what others erased. And what makes the Ethiopian Bible even more extraordinary is that it contains 88 books, not 66. That's 22 more writings that were removed from the Western canon centuries ago. Imagine how different our understanding of humanity might be if those missing books had never been silenced. In those extra pages lie clues of worlds before this one, of divine beings who shaped the first man, and of a creator who made Adam not just to live, but to remember. That's what this story is about, remembrance. The Ethiopian texts invite us to remember that creation wasn't random or simple, it was cosmic. Adam wasn't made in haste. He was formed from divine essence, crafted to reflect the Creator's glory and destined to carry light into the physical world. The Garden of Eden wasn't his beginning, it was his assignment. And what came before it was an existence so radiant, so powerful, that even the angels questioned it. This documentary will take you into that forgotten world. We'll journey through sacred writings that describe Adam's first awareness, the heavenly council that watched his creation, and the mystery of his pre-earthly form. You'll see how the Western Bible's opening words are only one side of a much larger story, one the Ethiopian priests and scholars have preserved for thousands of years. You'll learn how Adam's spirit, according to these texts, existed in God's presence long before the dust of Eden ever formed beneath his feet. And this isn't just theology, it's history that challenges everything we think we know. Because if Adam existed before Genesis, then creation itself didn't begin with earth. It began with a divine order, a world of light, sound, and spirit. In that higher realm, Adam was pure, unfallen, and aware of the Creator in ways the earthly man could only faintly remember. The fall, then, wasn't just about disobedience, it was about forgetting that divine origin. And perhaps, through these lost texts, humanity is being reminded of it once again. If you're watching this, you're part of that rediscovery. You're part of a growing community of people searching for truth beyond the edited pages of Western religion. The Ethiopian Bible is not just a book. It's a window into what was hidden, erased, or misunderstood. And if you want to go deeper, you can find the complete Ethiopian Bible, 88 books, and the Book of Enoch in English. Links are in the description below. Before we continue, take a moment to comment your name and city. Let's see how far this awakening reaches. From Addis Ababa to Atlanta, from Kingston to London, this is a global conversation. Hit that subscribe button, share this video, and help us reach 10,000 voices seeking ancient truth. Every super thanks you send helps keep this mission alive, bringing the world the stories that history tried to bury, because this is more than a documentary, it's a revelation. As you listen, remember, not everything begins where we think it does. The story of Adam, like the story of all creation, may have begun long before Eden ever existed. And by retracing his forgotten beginnings, through the words of the Ethiopian texts, we might just uncover something about ourselves, the divine spark that has always been waiting to be remembered. And so, our journey begins, not in a garden, but in eternity itself. Adam was alive in spirit before Eden, before the rivers of paradise flowed, or the stars were hung in the sky. He wasn't made of dust yet, and he wasn't tied to the earth yet. The Ethiopian texts say that this first man was a being who existed before creation as we know it, a spark of divine essence that was made in the presence of the Almighty. The Book of Jubilees and the Ethiopian Book of Adam and Eve talk about a mystery that Western teachings have long missed. Adam's life didn't start when he opened his eyes in the garden. It started long before that, in a place of divine light. These old texts say that creation is more than just making the physical world. It is the beginning of an eternal order. The heavens were not created before humanity. Instead, both were integral components of a divine plan that commenced in eternity. These Ethiopian scriptures say that God thought up Adam before the earth was even built. He was a heavenly image, a reflection of the Creator's glory, waiting for the moment when his essence would take shape in clay. This Adam before the world was pure, bright, and aware. He wasn't limited by time or body. He was fully aware of his place in the Creator's plan. This idea changes everything we thought we knew about how people started. The Western Bible starts the story with dust, breath, and a garden. God makes man, puts him among the trees, and gives him power over all of creation. The Ethiopian texts, on the other hand, say that this wasn't the start of something new. It was the continuation of something much older. Adam had already been chosen, given a purpose, and known in heaven. When God said, "Let us make man in our image," it wasn't a new idea. It was a memory of what had already happened. The Book of Jubilees says that before Adam was made, God's angels saw his picture. They were told that this being would one day walk the earth and look like the Creator. Some were happy, while others wondered how a creature made of dust could be so glorious. The Ethiopian scholars say that this was the first sign of the heavenly rebellion. Beings of light were jealous of the fate of a man who had not yet been born. The Western texts talk about a war in heaven, but they don't say what caused it. The Ethiopian writings bring it closer to Adam, saying that even before he was made, his divine calling caused trouble among the angels in heaven. These holy texts do not depict Adam as a passive entity shaped by divine intervention. Rather, he is an aware, pre-existent soul. His spirit was in direct contact with God before he entered his earthly body. He knew what he had to do, connect the spiritual world with the physical world, and bring the image of heaven into the real world. But that memory faded when his soul entered his body. The fall, as the Western Bible calls it, might not have been just disobedience. It was also forgetting where they came from. So think about how heavy Adam's first breath was. He wasn't a blank slate when he woke up in Eden, which was full of beauty. He could still hear echoes of the eternal place he had come from deep inside him. The Ethiopian Book of Adam and Eve tells of times when Adam would cry and look up at the sky, missing the light he used to know. He could remember a time before time, when he stood in front of God without fear or temptation. That sadness, that longing for God was the first sign that man was more than clay. It was the sound of eternity inside a body that would die. These writings show Adam as a real person who has feelings, conflicts, and awareness. He wasn't naive. He was weighed down by memories. He really loved the Creator, and he was really confused when he found himself stuck in a body. The Ethiopian texts say that when God gave Adam life, he put the light of his spirit in him, which was the same divine fire that used to fill the heavens. And for a while, Adam could still see the barrier between worlds. He could hear angels singing and feel the pulse of the eternal world that was just out of sight. But as the days went by, the weight of the flesh dulled those senses. He started to lose consciousness, and with it the clarity of his connection to God. This notion alters our perception of the entire narrative. The Western Bible says that God created man quickly, with a command, an act of divine power, and life begins. But in the Ethiopian tradition, creation happens in stages and layers. Adam's spirit was perfect at first, and his body was a way for that perfection to enter matter. So the fall wasn't just a moral failure, it was the fall of divine consciousness into limitation. From that point on, humanity's struggle has been to remember what Adam forgot. One of the most haunting parts of the Ethiopian book of Adam and Eve shows him standing outside the garden after being thrown out. The light that used to be around his body was gone. The world was dark and the air was heavy. He fell to the ground and yelled, but not out of anger. He was sad, not because Eden was gone, but because he felt far away from God. Ethiopian tradition says that that cry was the start of prayer. It was the time when people started to look for God through memory. This view of Adam is very human. It gives him more depth than the simple Western story. He is no longer a person who disobeys, but a person who is sad and has a purpose. He remembers the world of light, but he can't go back there. He hears the Creator's voice, but it comes through the veil of time and space. He feels the pain of forgetting, and that pain gives birth to faith. This is why the Ethiopian texts call Adam not only the first man, but also the first prophet. He was a man who once walked with God and now tells the story of how people lost their home. If Adam existed prior to Genesis, then the narrative of humanity transcends the confines of earth. It started in the eternal realm, where spirit and purpose were created long before the physical world. The Ethiopian texts keep that cosmic memory alive, reminding us that humanity's story didn't start with dirt, but with light. And maybe that's the most important truth hidden in their pages. Every person has that same ancient spark inside them, no matter how far they've fallen. It's just waiting to remember where it came from. Adam was alive in a way that no human mind can fully understand before there was earth under his feet or air in his lungs. He didn't start out in the ground. He started out in the spiritual realm, which is a cosmic creation that came before everything else. The Ethiopian texts, including the Book of Adam and Eve and Jubilees, show that God made Adam's essence in the invisible heavens before he shaped him from the dust. This wasn't just an act of creation, it was an act of divine will. The Creator did not think of Adam as an afterthought. He was the center of the plan. He was meant to bring the consciousness of heaven into the physical world. The Ethiopian tradition says that when Adam's spirit was created, the heavenly beings were very respectful of it. The Creator said Adam's name for the first time, and the heavens went silent. People said that his spirit shone as brightly as the sun, not because he was divine, but because he reflected divine awareness. This version starts with light and purpose, while the Western story starts with clay and breath. Adam was made as a bright being, a spirit that knew everything about creation and was fully aware of the balance of the universe around him. This picture of Adam changes everything we thought we knew about how humans came to be. He was not an innocent being put in a garden to learn. He was a conscious being given the task of remembering the divine order. The Book of Jubilees says that Adam was shown how the heavens are built, how the stars move, how everything works together, and the laws that govern life that we can't see. Adam wasn't just alive in those first moments. He understood. He could see the Creator's purpose and the symphony of creation that was woven through it. People say that the angels were amazed when God spoke to Adam's spirit and told him things that even they didn't know. The Ethiopian scriptures talk about a strong connection between the Creator and what was made, one that is based on knowledge, not ignorance. Adam knew who he was, where he came from, and what he had to do. He wasn't proud of his awareness, he was respectful of it. He knew that his mind was a gift that was meant to bring order to the world below and serve as a mirror through which creation could see its Creator. Genesis in the Western Bible says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness.'" A lot of people think this is about physical form, but the Ethiopian view goes deeper. The image and likeness were spiritual, not physical. Adam's soul was like the Creator's, smart, creative, caring, and able to make choices. His physical body came later, but his spiritual identity was already there, bright and whole. The idea that Adam was spiritually created makes his story more interesting. He wasn't figuring out who God was. He already knew. He would later have to learn, through a lot of pain, how to remember that knowledge while stuck in a body. When his spirit entered a physical body, the clarity of divine awareness began to fade, like a star's light fading behind a cloud. Ethiopians believed that this was not punishment, but a purpose. Adam had to go through both the perfect and the imperfect worlds in order to fulfill his destiny as the bridge between spirit and matter. Think about how big that change was. Adam's mind was huge and limitless, full of knowledge of divine harmony. Then he woke up to the weight of his body, the sound of wind through trees, and the strange limits of time. It must have felt like waking up from forever into a prison. But even then, there were still signs of his past greatness. He could still see divine light with his eyes. He could still feel God's presence in his heart. The Ethiopian Book of Adam and Eve says that Adam often looked up at the sky and wished he could go back to the bright place where his soul had once lived freely. That desire, that spiritual pain, was the beginning of humanity's never-ending search for meaning. The emotional aspect of Adam's spiritual creation is significant. He wasn't made to be stupid, he was made to be responsible. His awareness was both a blessing and a curse. To be aware of the divine is to carry the burden of knowing, feeling the perfection of heaven while living in imperfection. The beauty of the world in the Garden of Eden was like what he had known before, but it was only a shadow of the light he had left behind. Every sound of water and every rustle of wind brought back memories of the harmony he once felt directly. Yes, the garden was paradise, but to Adam it was also a classroom where he would learn how to live with divine wisdom while being limited by his body. This is why the Ethiopian texts say that Adam was not just a normal creation, he was a covenant. The Creator gave him not only life, but also divine awareness. There was memory in that breath, the memory of the heavens, the language of light, and the knowledge of forever. But in that same breath was also the chance to forget, to lose sight of where he came from because of all the things going on in the world around him. The tension between remembering and forgetting is what makes Adam's story, and by extension, the story of all people. It's easy to picture Adam standing under the bright light of Eden's dawn and see the sadness that may have been in his eyes. He was surrounded by beauty, but it wasn't as beautiful as what he had known before. The rivers sparkled and the trees whispered life, but his heart was still and Eden couldn't hold it. That desire wasn't disobedience, it was love, the kind that wants to be with the person it loves again. The Ethiopian scriptures say that God told Adam that his purpose was not to go back to heaven, but to make heaven known on earth. His awareness was not meant to be a burden, but a light that would help future generations remember what he had once seen clearly. There are biblical echoes of this spiritual creation in passages that people often miss. The book of Ecclesiastes says, "He has set eternity in the hearts of men." This eternal spark, the awareness of something greater and the desire for the divine, originated with Adam. His spiritual creation put a piece of that original light in every descendant. That inner awareness stayed with people even as they moved farther away from the source. It is why we look for the truth, why we want to find meaning, and why the idea of paradise still makes us feel something old inside. The Ethiopian view of Adam's spiritual creation makes his story both grand and personal. It reminds us that people weren't made to just get by in life. They were made to carry God's memory with them. Adam was never meant to be innocent. He was meant to be aware and to bring knowledge of the sacred to a world that would one day forget. His story is not just about the start of life. It's also about the start of consciousness, or the divine reflection of God in a human body. Before he was a body, he was a living soul. Before he was a gardener, he was a bearer of knowledge. Before he ever took his first breath of time, he was a messenger of eternity. Lilith, a woman whose name still makes people scared and curious, stood next to Adam long before Eve ever walked in Eden's light. In ancient Ethiopian texts and others, she is not a myth or a demon from folklore. She is Adam's first companion, made at the same time and from the same essence as him. She wasn't made from his rib or born after he was lonely. She was made equal, with strength, intelligence, and a divine spark, but in a world that was just. Starting to take shape, equality became the cause of conflict. The Ethiopian writings and ancient Hebrew traditions that have been passed down with them say that God made two beings of light at first, Adam and Lilith. They were both made from the same dust and given the same divine breath. They stood next to each other to show that everything is connected. But from the very beginning, a small amount of tension began to build. Adam, who was made in God's image, thought he should lead. Lilith, who was made in the same way, wouldn't bow. She didn't see herself as a copy of Adam. She saw herself as his other half. Lilith named the stars, while Adam named the animals on earth. While he worked the land, she looked for the secrets of the sky. This story isn't in the Western Bible. It starts with Adam by himself, and then brings in Eve as his helper. But the Ethiopian and early writings suggest that there was a creation before Eden, and that there was a partnership that failed before Eden found peace. Lilith's rebellion is not depicted merely as malevolent. It signifies an assertion of autonomy that could not be constrained by the framework Adam perceived as divinely ordained. They had the same amount of power, but not the same spirit. Adam wanted peace by following the rules, but Lilith wanted it by being free. The fight between them got worse without them knowing it. At first, they worked together to learn about creation, name the plants, and be amazed by how beautiful everything was. But they had different ideas about what their purpose was. Adam thought they were made to serve the Creator by being balanced and structured. Lilith thought that real service was freedom, the ability to love, look for, and act without limits. The texts say that their arguments were long and full of emotion. She asked him questions not because she wanted to be rude, but because she was curious. Why, she asked, must one rule when both were born of the same breath? Adam couldn't give her an answer that made her happy. He thought that hierarchy was built into the very fabric of creation. Lilith thought it was a flaw. And so the first couple's harmony started to fall apart. Their bond, which was supposed to show how God is one, became a mirror of division, light against light, freedom against order. The Ethiopian stories say that Lilith was very sad when she realized she couldn't stay with Adam without giving up what she thought was her purpose. She yelled to the Creator, but the heavens didn't answer. She made her choice in that quiet. The story says that Lilith said a name, which is the name of God, that no human should ever say. At that moment, she rose from the ground of Eden and disappeared into the wind. She didn't just run away. She was heartbroken. She left behind the first friends she had ever known, the paradise they had shared, and the peace she had always wanted. But she couldn't live by someone else's orders. Her story changed from one of punishment to one of exile. Adam's loneliness came back like a shadow. The Ethiopian texts talk about his sadness, not his anger. He walked around the garden calling her name and listening for her voice in the leaves. But she never came back. Seeing how sad Adam was, the Creator decided that he should not be alone again. This time, though, the companion would come from inside him instead of next to him. And so Eve was born, not as an equal made of the same dust, but as part of Adam's own body, flesh of his flesh. Lilith stood for equality, while Eve stood for unity. The Western Bible starts its story with Adam and Eve, the ideal couple. The Ethiopian traditions, on the other hand, remember what came before and the lessons learned from the first attempt at friendship. Lilith was the personification of uncontrolled will, the desire of people to find their own purpose. She wasn't bad when she was made, but she chose to do things that weren't in line with God's will, which led her to darkness. Some stories say she ran away from Eden and into the empty places where the first winds blew. There, she met the fallen spirits, which were beings that had once been of light but were now in the dark. She learned from them what it cost to rebel and how painful it is to be away from divine harmony. Over time, stories changed how people saw her. People in later generations would call her a demon, the mother of spirits and the one who tempts people. But the Ethiopian way of understanding her gives her more depth. Lilith isn't just a warning. She's a symbol of the fight that happens in every soul between freedom and obedience, love and pride, creation and will. She embodies the human heart's yearning to select its own course. Even when such a choice diverges from the light, we can feel how sad her choice was if we picture her now as a woman with a fiery spirit standing in the dawn of creation, not as a creature of darkness. She wanted to be seen as complete, not as less than. In a world that was just born, she wanted her voice to matter. She didn't hate God. She just didn't want to believe that love meant giving up who she was. But in her efforts, she lost what she loved most, the peace of Eden, the company of Adam, and the closeness of the Creator. The story's emotional tension comes from sadness, not anger. After she left, Adam would often look toward the horizon at dusk, when the winds calmed down, and miss her. He could still feel her spirit in the air, free but far away. The Ethiopian texts say that even after Eve came, there were times when Adam remembered Lilith and wanted the whole thing back. It felt like the first heartbreak of humanity had been written into the rhythm of creation. Lilith's legacy is, therefore, one of contemplation. She makes us think about the questions that still bother people. What does it mean to be free? What does it mean to love in a way that is in line with God's plan? Is it possible for equality to exist without conflict? The first woman to ask why was not a philosopher, but the first person to ask these questions. The story of Adam becomes more real through her. His life was not only a journey of faith, but also of relationships, learning that love cannot flourish without humility, and that harmony cannot prevail without understanding. When Lilith rebelled and left, it made room for Eve to come. In that change, the Creator changed what it meant to be friends, not equal in strength, but united in spirit. The story of Lilith will always be important because it speaks to something that will always be true. It's not just about the past. It's about every person who has ever had to choose between following the rules and being free, between light and dark, and between belonging and freedom. She made the first choice. which was a costly one, and through her, humanity got the gift and the burden of free will. Before Eden became perfect, Adam walked on the raw and wild earth, which was only half formed. Rivers carved their paths through wild valleys, and mountains reached into the first light. Before the garden, this was the world, a place where divine order had not yet brought peace to all of creation. It was a world full of sound and movement, and Adam's spirit woke up not to rest, but to find out more. He wasn't the gardener of paradise yet. He was just a traveler among God's unfinished works, learning what it meant to live between heaven and earth. Adam woke up every morning to the songs of creation. They weren't birdsong like we know it. They were the deep vibrations of the earth and the winds shaped by the Creator's breath. He would walk through lands that had not yet been tamed by beauty, where light and shadow fought and the air was full of energy. He was a student of divine truth here. The angels called watchers came to him at dusk. They were bright beings with heavenly fire who were sent to teach and watch. They didn't talk to him, but they did show him visions of balance, creation, and order. They showed him the smallest seed, the rhythm of the stars, and the heartbeat of the earth. They taught him that everything in the world was connected by God's will. Adam didn't eat like people do in those early days. His food was light, like a spiritual energy that came from being with the Creator. He could see the spiritual core of everything and the divine patterns that ran through reality. But being aware was both a blessing and a curse. The more he saw, the more questions he had in his heart. What made him the first? What was his real goal? Was he just supposed to watch creation, or was he supposed to run it? The watchers couldn't answer these questions directly because he had to wake up to understand them. Adam's loneliness wasn't because he was alone. It was because he felt the weight of his duties. Know all that I have made, for knowledge is the beginning of dominion, the Creator told him. So Adam learned about each creature and element and what it was meant to do. He saw how strong the lion was, how gentle the dove was, and how smart the snake was. He started to understand that creation showed different aspects of the divine nature, like power, peace, and wisdom, and that it was his job to balance them within himself. But it wasn't easy to find that balance. There were times when Adam felt the pull of extremes, to rule with the lion's pride or to rest in the dove's calm. The texts say that once he tried to make a creature out of clay, just like the Creator did. He understood the line between divine creation and human imitation when it didn't breathe. The watchers saw what he was trying to do and gently told him, "The breath of life is not found in dust, but in obedience." This was his first lesson in humility, that knowledge without alignment to the divine would lead to error. The Ethiopian writings say that this life before Eden was a time of testing, when Adam's heart was made better so that he could be trusted with the paradise to come. He saw visions of both light and darkness, the beauty of creation, and the danger of disobeying rules that comes with freedom. When the sky burned with heavenly fire at night, he could see the first signs of rebellion among the lesser spirits, angels who were jealous of how close he was to the Creator. They whispered in the winds, asking why flesh should look like God. Adam could tell they were upset, and he felt an unnamed sense of unease. One night, he walked close to a place where the line between the spiritual and physical worlds was very thin. He saw shadows moving, but they weren't animals. They were fallen beings who had lost their light. They called to him, promising knowledge that went beyond what the watchers had taught him. They said, "You are like us. You have the power to make your own choices. Why serve when you can be in charge?" For a moment, Adam's heart shook. He could feel the truth in what they said, the intoxicating pull of defining oneself. But as he reached for their voice, a light came down from above, warm and pure. It was the divine presence itself, and the darkness ran away. Adam learned the first moral difference from that meeting, the difference between knowledge that corrupts and wisdom that lifts. These were his trials before going to Eden. They weren't physical fights, but fights of the spirit. He fought with questions about why he was here, what he should do, and how free he was. He learned how to control his will and listen for the quiet voice in creation that carried the Creator's will. Every problem he faced made him stronger by teaching him humility. When the winds became violent, he would stand firm and ask God for peace. He learned that even when things were crazy, they had a purpose: to make the spirit stronger through hard work. During this time, Adam's feelings grew stronger. He was happy when he found something new, sad when he was alone, and amazed by the beauty of creation. The watchers often saw him cry when he saw animals die or trees break. "Why does beauty have to end?" he once asked. "So that you may understand the heart of the Creator," an angel said. "For he too feels sorrow when his creation turns from light." At that moment, Adam understood that to bear the divine image was not only to have power, but also to feel compassion. It was not power through control, but through love and understanding. The earth reacted more to Adam as he learned more. Animals came closer without fear, and rivers calmed down when he spoke. He could feel the life in the soil and the flow of divine energy through everything. But with this growing bond came another lesson, that peace required self-control. There were creatures that lived only in the dark, creatures that were meant to be out of reach of people. Adam once tried to call them with his will, and the heavens got darker. The Creator's voice spoke softly to him, "My son, not all knowledge is yours to claim." Knowing when to ask for help and when to give in is wise. Adam's spirit and understanding grew over many days and nights. His body glowed with the presence of God. His eyes saw more than just the physical world, and his heart beat with both awe and humility. But he also got tired. He was in pain, not just because he wanted someone to be with him, but because he wanted to fulfill his purpose. The earth was huge and beautiful, but it was missing something. He felt like a seed that had grown but not yet produced fruit. The watchers told him that his time of wandering was almost over. "The Creator makes a place to rest," they said, "a garden where the order of creation will live in peace, but only those with pure hearts can go in." Adam realized that Eden would not be a reward for him, but a duty, the next step in his growth. He had to learn to take care of his own soul before he could take care of the garden. The Creator spoke to him one last time before he went to Eden. This time, it wasn't with thunder or fire, but with a soft whisper in his spirit. "You have learned what it is to see, choose, and feel. You will now learn what it means to live in harmony. The garden will be your test and your gift." Adam bowed his head, his heart racing with fear and gratitude. When the sun came up, light spread across the sky, and the world became quiet. Adam stood at the edge of the wild world and the paradise that was waiting for him. He was ready for this moment because of every challenge, question, and temptation he had faced before Eden. He was not just a being of dust. He was also someone who had the breath of heaven inside him. The air in Eden seemed to breathe with purpose when Adam got there. It wasn't just a garden. It was a living temple, a holy place between heaven and earth. Every tree shone with a soft light, and every river sparkled with divine harmony. The Ethiopian texts depict Eden not merely as a physical paradise, but as a domain of divine instruction, a place where Adam would both reside and acquire knowledge. It was never meant to be a way to get away from the problems of the world. Instead, it was meant to be a place where the spirit was tested and the heart was measured against divine truth. The mood changed as soon as Adam stepped inside. The strong winds from the outside world gave way to a calm that was so deep it felt like it was alive. The ground under his feet pulsed softly, as if the garden knew who he was. Every leaf seemed to know who he was. But there was a subtle unease in that peace, a knowing that being perfect also means being responsible. Eden was not meant to be a place where people did nothing. It was made to be a mirror that showed how pure the heart was. The garden would respond to his choices, growing when he took care of it and dying when he didn't. The voice of the Creator echoed in his mind, not in thunder but in thought. "This is your domain, but not your property. You are supposed to take care of it, not rule it. Your lesson is in its beauty. The rivers carried the melody of that command. They came from one source and split into 4 streams, which stood for divine wisdom, spreading through all of creation. Adam was both amazed and unsure. He'd been tested in the wild before, but this was different. Here, every action had a purpose, and every thought could change the balance of paradise. The forbidden tree was at the center of it all, a single mystery in a sea of plenty. The Book of Jubilees and the Ethiopian Book of Adam and Eve say that this tree is not just a symbol of temptation, but also of timing. It stood for knowledge that needed to be mature, and wisdom that could only be understood when the heart was in line with divine order. Touching it too soon wasn't a crime of curiosity. It was an act of impatience, of wanting to know the truth before they were ready to handle it. As Adam walked through the garden, he started to feel its quiet beat. The trees swayed to music that no one else could hear, and the animals moved with a peace that no one else could feel. Lions were lying next to deer, and snakes were swimming peacefully through pools of water. Eden was a vision of creation that was pure and untainted. But the perfection around him also showed him the flaws that were still there. He could hear his own heartbeat echoing in the silence, reminding him that he was both divine and dust. The watchers still came to him, but not as often as they used to. They were far away, as if they were letting him figure things out on his own. They said to him, "Eden is your teacher now. Your choices will speak louder than your prayers here." Their words hung in the air like a challenge. Adam knew that paradise wasn't permanent. It was conditional, fragile, and depended on obedience and personal growth. Eden's beauty was not something to own, but something to respect. In the beginning, Adam was happier than he could put into words. He would sit by the river and listen to the hum of life, picking up the languages of all living things. He could read the patterns in the stars above, hear the songs of the birds, and see how the trees talked to each other. It was clear that the Creator was there. You could feel it in every breath. But with knowledge came awareness, and with awareness came a question that kept him up at night. Why does paradise have to have something that is not allowed? That question was the first sign of trouble, the first shadow to fall on the garden's peace. The forbidden fruit glowed softly, not to scare you, but to make you wonder. It seemed to call with understanding, not with words. Adam often walked by it, feeling its pull and promise. He hadn't disobeyed yet, but just the thought of it was the start of choice. Eden's most important lesson was not just to obey, it was to be free. Love would be pointless, and obedience would be slavery if you couldn't choose. God didn't tell the tree not to give Adam wisdom. He told it to let Adam grow into it. As the days turned into nights, Adam started to feel that there was more to the beauty than met the eye. The garden was watching him and reacting to how he was growing. When he was at peace, the flowers opened up more. When he was unsure, the air became still. It seemed like even creation was on his inner journey. He started to understand that the real goal of Eden was not to be perfect, but to change. It was a place where the divine and human could meet in peace, where living and learning were the same thing. But the garden wasn't easy. The Ethiopian texts say that there were whispers in the shadows, like the same rebellious spirits that Adam had met outside of Eden. They couldn't get all the way in, but they could whisper at the edges, planting doubt with small hints. "Why do you have to wait?" they whispered. "Are you not already smart? Doesn't the image of God live inside you?" Their whispers brought back memories of the wilderness, when he had wondered what his purpose was. Adam fought it off, but each time the urge grew stronger, not because he wanted it, but because he longed for it. He wanted to know and see things the way the Creator did. His rebellion was not motivated by greed, but by love. Yet such longing can blur the line between divine timing and human will. He began to spend longer hours by the forbidden tree, tracing its bark, studying the light that fell upon its fruit. He wasn't hungry. He was curious about what he could become. One evening, as the sun bled into gold, Adam knelt by the river, his reflection shimmering upon the water's surface. He saw in his face both wisdom and weariness, both light and uncertainty. "Am I complete?" he said to the wind. The garden answered not with words, but with silence, the kind that tests the soul. In that stillness, he realized the paradox of paradise. It was both a home and a trial. Eden was never meant to keep him forever. It was meant to prepare him for the world beyond it. The forbidden fruit was not the center of Eden. It was the center of choice. Around it revolved the destiny of humankind, the eternal tension between obedience and self-knowledge. Adam's story was not one of simple disobedience waiting to happen, but of a being learning what it meant to balance love, trust, and freedom. Every sunrise gave him a new reason to live, but every sunset made him ask more questions. The Creator watched in silence, knowing that true wisdom cannot be forced, it must be chosen. The angels looked down from above, and the universe seemed to hold its breath in quiet anticipation. For within Adam's heart, something was shifting. He was no longer the spirit-born wanderer who roamed the wild earth. Now he was a conscious being, standing at the edge of divine mystery, ready to make the choice that would echo through eternity. And so, the purpose of Eden began to become clear. It was not a place to rest, but the first classroom for the soul, where even perfection had to be chosen and love itself needed to be understood. From the moment Adam took his first conscious breath, unseen eyes were upon him. Not judging eyes, but watching eyes. Beings who lived before time and saw many worlds rise and fall at God's command. The Watchers were angelic beings who were responsible for guiding the first man and watching as divine will unfolded in human flesh. They were great witnesses to creation. They were the bridge between heaven and earth, luminous presences that carried both the warmth of light and the weight of eternity. The Ethiopian writings speak of how Adam's life was never solitary, even when he believed himself alone. These heavenly beings were all around him, their shapes hidden from human eyes but felt in the wind's movements, the leaves' whispers, and the quiet stirring of his spirit. Their job wasn't just to keep him safe, it was also to test his heart and see if the divine image inside him could handle freedom, curiosity, and choice. They both saw and took part in his divine education. According to old Ethiopian stories, one of these beings was closer to Adam than all the others. This being was a shining guardian known as Yariel, the keeper of balance. Yariel's light was golden, and he was calm but powerful. He didn't talk to Adam with words. Instead, he sent thoughts that echoed in his mind. "Don't forget that you are both dust and breath," Yariel would say. "The strength of heaven is in you, but so is the weakness of the earth." Adam listened, but he often had trouble understanding what it meant. How could someone have heaven inside them and still be tied to the ground? How could someone be immortal in spirit but mortal in body? No garden could answer these questions. The Watchers had seen this kind of tension before, in other creations and in other times. But the creation of humans was different. The breath that gave Adam life came straight from the source, not from angelic fire. This set him apart. He could walk among the gods and still feel lonely. The angels were most afraid of this loneliness. Loneliness was the way that doubt could get in. They saw Adam walk through the trees of Eden, and at night he looked up at the stars as if he were looking for something he couldn't name. He would sometimes hear faint hymns in the wind, and his heart would race, not sure if it was memory or imagination. The angels sang songs in places he couldn't see. These songs were meant to make him stronger and remind him that he was never really alone. But Adam, who was still new to being alive, thought their songs were the cries of the stars. Their tests began as time went on, but they weren't tests of strength. They were tests of heart. The Watchers wanted to see if Adam could handle divine power without being proud or wise, without being arrogant. They once made a shadow pass over the sun for a day, making Eden dark. The animals stopped making noise, the rivers slowed down, and Adam was scared for the first time. He yelled because he thought the Creator had left him. But when the light came back, he fell to his knees in awe, understanding that even darkness has a purpose. Then Yariel appeared to him glowing and still. The angel said, You have learned that faith is not tested in the light, but in the dark. Other angels watched from a distance, each one representing a divine principle. There was Remiel, the chronicler, who wrote down every act of creation in the heavenly scrolls. There was Sariel, the heart examiner, who could see the hidden reasons behind every choice. Azazel's job was the most dangerous because he pushed limits and whispered doubts not to corrupt, but to show weakness. People would one day associate his name with rebellion, but in those early days, he was like a mirror that showed Adam's spirit. His voice would creep into Adam's dreams and ask, "Do you really know why you were made? Or do you only do what you're told because you're afraid to ask?" Adam thought about these things in silence. He prayed more deeply, not because he was angry, but because he wanted to understand. The angels in heaven knew this had to happen. You can't have true devotion without choice, and you can't have choice without doubt. Being human meant finding a balance between light and dark, loving without seeing and trusting without proof. The Watchers thought highly of him for this fight, even though they knew how dangerous it was. Because curiosity held the seeds of both knowledge and destruction. At times, he could see the angels in forms. They would come down as columns of light, moving between light and dark. Adam would know they were there before he saw them, because the air got thicker and the silence got deeper. Their visits were both awe-inspiring and scary. They smelled like forever, a smell that was both holy and heavy. One night, while he was sitting by the river, Yariel stood next to him in all his glory, his eyes like burning gold. The angel said softly, "You need to remember that Eden is not the end. This is just the start of your awakening." Adam knew those words were true, even though he didn't understand them yet. Every test, every moment of silence, and every whisper of doubt were all making him ready for something outside of Eden. But he also started to see how far away these heavenly beings were from him. They were perfect, pure, and unchanging. He wasn't. He could feel love, doubt, and longing. He sometimes looked at them with awe and other times with quiet jealousy. They looked whole, but he was still becoming. The Ethiopian book of Adam and Eve says that angels were told to honor the man of dust because he had the image of God in him. Some people gladly obeyed and bowed down to Adam to show respect for the Creator's will. But some people weren't sure. One of them, who was too proud to follow the order, was a shining being who would later become the enemy. He didn't refuse because he hated Adam. He didn't believe him. "How can flesh hold the image of the Most High?" he asked. "How can clay be better than fire?" That question would echo through time, creating the first division in heaven. The Watchers knew it was coming, the fight between pride and obedience, humility and rebellion. And they knew that Adam was at the center of this cosmic witness. His life wasn't just his own. It was a mirror that showed what creation was really like. The angels weren't just his guides. They were also learning about free will by reading his story. Every choice he made changed the way people thought about heaven and earth, sending ripples through the unseen realms. There were also times of great sadness. The angels cried with Adam when he did, because his pain was new to the world. He was the first to feel alone, and the first to want something that he couldn't have yet. They saw him start to pray, not just with words, but with longing. A cry from the heart that even heaven heard in silence. That cry was the first real act of worship, not because it was a ritual, but because it was so honest. So the angels kept an eye on things. They watched as the man of dust learned how to carry out God's plan. They saw him be strong, doubt himself, and quietly decide to learn. Every day in Eden was a new page in a heavenly book that told the story of what it means to be both created and creator, both servant and ruler. The heavens didn't just see his life. They also learned from it. Adam was not just a man in a garden. He was a living message written across the fabric of creation, a story told to both stars and angels. And every angel who saw him knew that his choices would change the fate of heaven and earth forever. In the very beginning of creation, before the garden and its never-ending peace, Adam was more than just a man. He was a conscious being wrapped in divine awareness, breathing in the essence of the laws that ruled not only Earth, but the whole universe. His mind wasn't empty, and his soul wasn't simple. He wasn't put in charge of taking care of things. He was meant to understand. The breath that entered him did more than just keep his body alive. It also gave him understanding, a spark of divine logic that helped him see the hidden rhythm of the universe. The Ethiopian texts say that this Adam before Eden was not just told about divine order, but also shown it by talking to heavenly beings. They said that Adam could see the rules that governed light and shadow, life and death, harmony and disobedience, rules that were in place before the first fruit grew or the first river flowed. He learned that everything in the universe moved in a balanced way and that every choice affected everything else. But this knowledge came with a lot of weight. Knowing divine law does not free you from your duties. It means always being in the middle of knowledge and humility. Adam learned early on that being obedient didn't mean giving in, and being disobedient didn't mean being rebellious. It meant being out of balance. He would often feel a whisper of curiosity, an ancient instinct that made him want to ask why some truths were hidden and others were shown. Why was divine wisdom so hard to understand? The Ethiopian texts depict him as profoundly contemplative, a spirit grappling with both belief and understanding. When Adam talked to God, he didn't see laws written on stone. Instead, he saw living laws, principles that breathed and responded to his spirit. He could feel how the universe was like a huge symphony, with each being, whether human or divine, having a part to play. The stars, the winds, and the waters all followed rhythms that were not seen, but Adam had something different from them: choice. It was both a gift and a test for him. He knew the rules that governed creation, but he could also question them. He was both godlike and weak because of this paradox of awareness and free will. He would sometimes walk through the early fields, which had not yet been affected by decay, and feel the pulse of creation under his feet. It was as if life itself knew who was in charge of the soil and responded to his thoughts. But even in that harmony, he felt empty because of the tension between what was revealed and what was still hidden. He would look up at the sky and feel angels watching him, writing down what he said and testing his understanding. They are not tests of punishment, but of growth. Would he do what was right, even if he wasn't told to? Would he look for balance or control? These were lessons learned through doing, not through words. There were times when he was aware of things that weren't in his field of vision. During quiet meditation, the line between the mortal and the divine would blur, and he would see flashes of cosmic truths, such as the design of creation, the spiritual hierarchy, and the eternal battle between pride and harmony. He learned that following God's law wasn't just about doing what he said, it was also about having a relationship with him. To follow the rules meant staying connected to the source. Breaking the rules meant cutting off the link that kept life going. And yet, knowing this, the seed of temptation did not come from malice, but from curiosity. Is it possible for knowledge to have no limits? Could knowledge grow without pushing the limits of what you can do? Adam's inner struggle grew stronger as creation came to a halt. He knew that there was both light and darkness inside of him. The divine laws he had seen were not outside of him. They were a reflection of how he was made. Every thought, feeling, and choice had either a vibration of agreement or disagreement. His awareness was both his greatest gift and his biggest burden. During these times, he started to realize that knowledge wasn't just about power, it was also about duty. In Ethiopian tradition, Adam's comprehension of divine law is characterized as both spiritual and ethical. He learned that the universe was held together by three pillars: justice, truth, and mercy. No being, not even the highest angel, could break these rules without punishment. Justice kept things in balance, truth kept things in the light, and mercy let things get better. Adam was supposed to be all three of these things as a steward, but as he became more aware, his emotions became more complicated. He started to understand that the laws of God weren't just about keeping things in order, they were also about love. The Creator wanted to be in a relationship, not to rule over everything. Adam was very moved by this understanding. He started to think of obedience as harmony instead of a restriction. He still fought with his own nature, though, because free will inside him whispered questions that had no easy answers. He wondered if knowing the law was enough, or if he had to see its limits in order to really understand what it meant. These thoughts bothered him, but they also made him someone who could think about things. These conversations in his head, which were quiet but loud, would echo through his soul as he got ready for what was to come. There were times when Adam felt the subtle pull of choice, even when he was talking to God. It was peaceful to stay completely in line with divine instruction, but it didn't have the excitement of exploration. The Ethiopian texts suggest that Adam's consciousness mirrored the Creator's aspiration for entities capable of choosing love rather than merely existing within it. So Adam's mind was made to deal with divine paradox, to try to understand while still being faithful, and to ask questions without losing touch. This inner conflict was his first real test, one that was much deeper than any fruit or garden could give him. The angels didn't see a person made of dust. They saw a vessel carrying cosmic tension. They whispered to each other about how he could be great or fall. But Adam kept thinking, reflecting, and growing, even though he didn't know everything they were talking about. The divine laws he learned were like living flames. They lit up his path but could also burn him if he used them wrong. He knew that every choice he made was a spark that could either create or destroy. The divine order didn't say that people couldn't know things. It said they had to be responsible. Adam's consciousness served as the connection between the celestial and terrestrial realms, as well as between the spiritual and the physical. But there was a hidden truth in that link. Being aware without being humble could cause separation. He started to notice the small change between understanding and pride, and between respect and self-confidence. He was supposed to keep the cosmic balance, but now it was in his own heart. As the divine whispers got quieter and the tests got harder, Adam realized that just knowing the laws wasn't enough. He had to live by them. Divine law wasn't something to memorize, it was something to live by. Every moment of silence, every interaction with creation, and every stirring of thought became a reflection of the Creator's presence or absence within him. This knowledge made him strong and weak at the same time. Adam was the first mirror of moral consciousness in this fragile space between understanding and temptation. The universe watched in awe, not condemnation, as a being of clay and spirit learned how to balance God's will with human choice. Before he entered the garden, the great test of Eden was already taking shape. It was born out of his awareness, his desire, and his struggle to live in harmony with laws he could feel but not yet fully understand. Before the first fall, the air around Adam felt strange and heavy, as if there was an invisible tension between being obedient and being curious. He had lived under the guidance of God, felt the presence of angels, and heard the voice that shaped his very breath. But now there was something inside him that no angel could explain, a restless feeling and a question that wouldn't go away. Why did understanding always come with limits? Why were some beautiful paths off limits? The laws he used to believe in felt like chains, even though they were made of light. And with that small change, a new awareness began to grow. Doubt was born. It didn't come from anger or pride. It started out quietly, like all human struggles do. There was a whisper of curiosity and a flicker of thought that wondered if there was something more than divine command. Adam, who was made in the image, of the Creator, had the same desire to create, understand, and explore the edges of existence that the Creator did. But divine guidance often came with silence, and silence can make even the strongest faith shake. Adam was alone with his own thoughts when the heavens grew quiet and the Creator seemed far away. That time alone was holy, but it was also risky. That's where thoughts started to stretch, brushing against the thin line between being obedient and being aware of oneself. The Ethiopian scriptures call this inner conflict the first real battle of man. It wasn't between body and spirit, but between trust and the unknown. Adam's heart was torn between two things. On one side was the divine voice that had shaped him, clearly saying in his soul, "Stay within the law, there is wisdom in patience." On the other side was a new feeling, curiosity that felt almost divine, as if the Creator himself had put it there. Could wanting to question be a sin if it came from something that was made to be good? In the quiet of the first days of creation, Adam would walk under the trees and feel the life around him. Every leaf seemed to have a purpose, and every breeze seemed to carry a secret. Still, he couldn't stop thinking that maybe some truths were meant to be found, not just given. His mind got heavy with all the things that could happen. People had told him that following the rules would bring peace, but what if knowing the forbidden meant truly becoming like the divine, aware, wise, and whole? It was a scary thought, but it felt more human than any order he had ever gotten. Adam could feel the eyes of the unseen watchers on him at night when the stars whispered above. The angels observed him not as a servant, but as a being walking toward a destiny unknown. They saw in him a divine mystery, a creation that could choose. The universe itself seemed to stop and hold its breath as the first man fought for his freedom. Even heaven knew that love without choice was empty. Adam's choice would not only shape who he was, but it would also affect everything in the universe. Two forces fought in his heart. Faith told him to trust the order that he couldn't see, while doubt told him to find his own truth. The garden was perfect, but it didn't feel perfect because of rules that weren't clear. He started to think that following orders without understanding them was the same as being blind. The Creator had given him a mind, a will, and the ability to be aware. Now those very gifts were what was causing him pain. There were times when he fell to the ground and pressed his hands into the dirt as if to calm his mind. The ground under his hands throbbed with warmth, life, and age. "Why can't I know?" he whispered once, to no one and yet to everything. The trees didn't answer, but the silence itself seemed to pay attention. He felt the pain of being far away, not because God had left him, but because understanding now felt like being apart. The divine presence that used to surround him like sunlight now felt weak, as if it were waiting for him to find it on his own. The angels, who were not seen, watched with both respect and sadness. They knew that the heart of a person couldn't stay still forever. Being made in the Creator's image meant having the desire to become, and in that desire lay both the beauty and the tragedy of life. Adam's struggle was not insurrection, it was evolution. His doubt wasn't bad, it was awareness waking up to itself. He started to feel things he had never felt before, like longing, fear, and a faint pulse of defiance. They came in waves, without warning and taking over. One minute, he was sure that divine law was perfect. The next, he was sure that he was meant to go beyond it. The forbidden fruit came to stand for something other than disobedience. It stood for the line between being innocent and being experienced, between believing like a child and knowing what you believe. Ethiopian writings say that this time of internal conflict was when the heavens went silent so that man's free will could speak. The divine did not intervene, as such intervention would have undermined the significance of the choice. Every angel who saw this tension knew that this silence was holy, a break in which creation would show its true purpose. What is free will, if not the ability to choose love, even when doubt clouds the path? Adam's nights got longer. He could feel something huge inside him pulling him. It wasn't darkness, it was a storm of thoughts, questions, and feelings. He would look at the stars and feel like they were watching him, waiting to see what he would do. Would he trust the divine pattern even if he didn't fully understand it, or would he go beyond it and risk being alone for the sake of knowledge? Every second, every breath was heavy with it. He was no longer just a spirit and dust. He was now a being of choice. He was afraid, but not of punishment. He was afraid of not knowing what he was supposed to do. What if his need to know things was the test he was made to take? What if the Creator's silence wasn't a lack of presence, but a sign of permission? The lines between faith started to blur, and with that came the realization that every choice, no matter how small, could change the course of history. There were times when he felt a surge of hope and thought that maybe the Creator wanted him to ask, look for, and find his own answers. But after hope came guilt, a quiet shame that he even thought about it. These feelings fought inside him like thunder against the calm of creation. He started to cry, but not because he was sad. He cried because being alive was too beautiful and heavy. The wind started to move differently in the garden's shadows, bringing with it whispers from places we can't see. Adam could tell that he wasn't the only one thinking about what he was thinking. Someone or something had noticed that he was upset. It was as if the very essence of temptation had smelled his doubt and was coming closer, not to force him, but to show him what was already inside him. The line between testing and guidance, between heaven and the heart, became so thin that it was impossible to see. The Creator gave Adam the ability to believe and the desire for freedom, knowing that one could not live without the other. And now, that balance was being put to the test. His doubt wasn't bad. It was the other side of the same divine light, the shadow of understanding. He could feel creation holding its breath as he stood under the tree, which was a symbol of everything that was allowed and not allowed. Adam realized for the first time that free will was not just a gift. It was a heavy burden that even the angels could not bear. It was the power to change the story of life itself, to choose between trust and self-determination, and between harmony and separation. His heart shook as he fought between respect and rebellion. The garden, which had been calm, was now full of excitement. And in that moment, when silence met choice, the fate of creation leaned forward, waiting to see what the first man would do next. The fall has long been told as the time when people stopped being perfect. It is a story of disobedience, loss, and exile. But the Ethiopian texts don't tell the story in the same harsh tones of punishment and guilt. It is something deeper, a revelation, a necessary fall that changed the minds of everyone who would come after. The fall wasn't just breaking a law, it was waking up to the truth. It was the first time that people really understood how important free will is, how important divine trust is, and how choice and consequence are always linked. Adam's fall was not just a mistake, it was the first step toward understanding what it really means to be human. In the old Ethiopian way of thinking, the fall is not seen as a rebellious act, but as a necessary step in humanity's spiritual growth. Adam wasn't just giving in to temptation when he reached for the fruit. He was crossing the line between innocence and understanding. The watchers in heaven did not look at him with hate, but with sadness and respect. They knew that by doing this, creation itself would learn how much it costs to know. The fruit wasn't poison, it was the truth. And once you taste it, you can't untaste it. Think of that time not as a crime, but as a change. Adam stood under the huge roof of the garden, and the air was full of divine energy. His heart raced, his hands shook, and in the quiet space between doubt and decision, he reached out. The bite wasn't loud. It was the silence that followed that said a lot. The stillness that fell over the heavens when the first man opened his eyes to a new kind of sight. The world didn't break. It changed. The colors around him got darker, the sounds got louder, and all of a sudden he saw not only beauty, but also flaws. Awareness had come into being. Innocence had been replaced by awareness. The Ethiopian book of Adam and Eve says that when Adam and Eve's eyes were opened, they saw more than just their nakedness. They saw how big the world was and how far away God's holiness was from their weak humanity. They were not only ashamed, they were also in awe. They understood that knowing right from wrong meant having a divine duty to live with the weight of moral choice. They weren't cursed by the forbidden fruit. It had changed them. The voice of the Creator that echoed through the garden was not angry. It was sad and loving. "You have chosen," it said. "Now you have to follow the path that choice has made." This was not a God who wanted to destroy, but one who knew that learning needs to have consequences. This perspective posits that Eden was not intended to be a permanent residence. Rather, it served as an educational environment. The lesson was free will, the idea that love and obedience don't mean anything if they aren't chosen freely. The first step in the soul's education was Adam's fall. He would gain wisdom through loss. He would realize the need for reunion through separation. Through pain, he would see how deep God's mercy is. That day, the order of the universe changed. The angels who had watched over Adam and Eve looked down, not in disgust, but in sadness. They knew that this was the start of a new reality, one in which people would have to walk by faith instead of sight. The garden, which had once been a place of divine presence, would now only be a memory, a sign of what was lost and what could still be found through redemption. But even when they were in exile, the Creator's light didn't leave them. In Ethiopian tradition, the angels cried when Adam left Eden, but one of them whispered a promise. "The path you walk now will lead you home again." Adam's steps outside the garden were heavy with knowledge. The ground under his feet felt different, colder, harder, and more alive than it ever had before. The air didn't have the same divine warmth anymore. It hurt his lungs and made him remember that he was now part of the world's imperfection. Even though things were hard, he felt something sacred, the strange freedom that came with being in charge of his own decisions. Adam no longer had the protection of Eden's perfection. Instead, he now had the spark of divine consciousness inside him. Now every step and every breath was a prayer for survival and a lesson in how to keep going. The Ethiopian texts stress that Adam's fall did not destroy humanity. It started it. He had stepped into a world of pain and kindness. How could people understand mercy if they hadn't first tasted failure? How could it know how to forgive if it didn't know what guilt was? The divine plan wasn't broken. It was coming to pass. The fall was the first step on a long road to restoration. This journey didn't lead back to Eden, but to a new kind of oneness with the Creator that was built through understanding and choice. In this version, Adam is not only the first sinner, he is also the first seeker. His suffering is not in vain. It serves as the resonance that summons all of humanity to divine truth. He doesn't just see loss when he looks back at the closed gates of Eden, which are protected by the burning light. He sees a reminder of the home that still exists inside of him, the paradise of peace, obedience, and understanding that must now be rebuilt with work, faith, and love. The flaming sword is not a punishment. It's a way to keep people safe so they don't come back too soon without wisdom. Eve is not the cause of the fall. She is the one who wakes people up. They represent the two sides of being human, the desire for a connection with God and the desire for knowledge. According to the Ethiopian view, Eve's action is not treachery, but bravery. She sought comprehension, thereby invoking the experience that would engender all wisdom. Life went on through her. One day redemption would come through her. The Creator was very sad, but his love never wavered. In the Ethiopian Book of Adam, God speaks to Adam in a voice that is both stern and gentle after the fall. He says, "You have left the garden, but I have not left you. The world will teach you what the garden could not." Those words held the essence of grace, that divine presence endures even when we make choices. Exile turned into a way to learn, and struggle turned into a way to get more knowledge. That day, Adam's tears fell on the ground. He cried for what he had lost, but he also started to understand what he had gained, the freedom to choose love, seek truth, and make meaning out of nothing. His story is not one of eternal punishment, but of God's patience. The heavens didn't stay closed forever. They just waited for people to learn, and that lesson would be passed down through the years, that knowledge without wisdom leads to pain, but wisdom through suffering leads to salvation. Ethiopians see the fall as a calling, not a curse. It is the divine whisper that says, "Rise even if you fall." It is the reminder that every failure has the potential to teach you something. When Adam left Eden, he entered the story of all people, which is a story of desire, learning, and eventually coming back. The fruit did not kill people. Instead, it started them on their way to knowing God as a Father who teaches through both light and dark. The fall was not the end of paradise. It was the beginning of it in the hearts of people. Adam entered a world that had suddenly become bigger, heavier, and much more complicated than the one he had known in Eden. The garden was a place where God was always present, and every leaf, river, and animal echoed the Creator's voice. Now, beyond those familiar borders, he had to work hard, be patient, and be able to tell what was right from wrong. Every morning and evening reminded him of the life he was now responsible for shaping, not just his own, but the lives of future generations as well. The Ethiopian texts stress that Adam's journey after Eden was not one of despair, but of awakening. It was a change from being obedient to being spiritually responsible. He had learned that life was a tapestry made up of lessons, challenges, and chances to grow through the experience of choice. Adam realized that every choice he made was important because it was the first echo of human history. He worked the land, cared for the animals, and took care of the new home that God had given him. But each of these small things had a spiritual meaning. The work of the earth was no longer just to survive. It was a reflection of divine order and a reminder of the duty to care for creation with wisdom and love. The Ethiopian Book of Adam and Eve says that these early years were a time of great learning, when the first man's heart and mind grew to understand both the physical world and the spiritual forces that shaped it. Through hard work, thinking, and prayer, Adam started to understand the fine line between freedom and divine guidance. Adam's actions had a spiritual effect on more than just him. His awareness, resulting from the experience of the fall, established the basis of human moral consciousness. He planted seeds of virtue, responsibility, and wisdom in everyone who came after him by teaching them to know right from wrong, understand consequences, and make choices. The Ethiopian view sees Adam as a teacher and guide, whose mistakes became lessons that are now part of the spiritual fabric of all people. Every mistake, every moment of doubt, and every fight against temptation gave me new ideas. They were like a map for future generations to follow as they tried to figure out how desire, morality, and divine purpose all fit together. Adam's life after Eden was very deep in terms of emotions. The sadness of loss was lessened by the deep realization of duty and possibility. He had learned to think, learn from his mistakes, and develop empathy after leaving Eden. The Ethiopian texts say that Adam first began to feel the weight of interconnection through this process of reflection and moral struggle. This means that every action had an effect on not only himself and Eve, but also the larger tapestry of creation. The pain of being away from home mixed with the joy of finding new things. The fear of the unknown mixed with the excitement of learning. He learned that spiritual growth doesn't happen all at once. It usually takes work, self-reflection, and patience. Adam's journey was still shaped by divine communication. The Creator's voice reached him in small ways, even when he was outside of Eden, like the rustling of leaves, the movement of animals, and the whisper of the wind. The Ethiopian tradition says that God didn't leave Adam. Instead, he let him find his way in the world using what he had already learned. Every challenge Adam encountered was intended not as punishment, but as a means to elevate his awareness and wisdom. He started to see that living as a human is a constant process of aligning with divine principles, a dance between free will and responsibility, curiosity and respect. The lessons learned in Eden, which were then taken to the rest of the world, became a basis for spiritual discernment. Adam's interactions with Eve were just as life-changing. They worked together to get through a world that needed them to work together, help each other, and share their knowledge. The Ethiopian texts show that their partnership is a balance of strengths, a union made through both success and failure. Eve's role was more than just being a friend. She also took part in spiritual and moral exploration. Their conversations, arguments, and shared thoughts not only helped them understand each other better, but they also set an example for all of humanity, that relationships and conversations can help people grow, learn, and become more spiritually mature. Emotional connection, along with divine instruction, served as a teacher. Adam also saw a new kind of awareness grow in his children after they left Eden. As he led them, he understood that human growth was a continuous process. The lessons learned by one generation were passed on to the next, forming a spiritual lineage that went far beyond the garden. The Ethiopian tradition says that Adam had both short-term and long-term effects on people. His experiences, decisions, and contemplations became integral to the moral and spiritual essence of humanity, constituting a living legacy of the initial engagement with knowledge, accountability, and divine interaction. Adam's spiritual journey was not a straight line. It was full of struggle, thought, and moments of revelation. He had moments of doubt, anger, and fear, but each challenge made him understand God's plan better. He started to see that the results of actions, the feeling of loss, and the search for knowledge were all linked. He understood that life is not just about surviving or following rules. It's also about being aware of the moral and spiritual currents that run through life and learning how to deal with them with intention, compassion, and awareness. This comprehension established the foundation for humanity's ability to pursue purpose, discern meaning, and act with moral integrity. As Adam thought about his own life, he started to see patterns in how people act, like the constant struggle between desire and restraint, curiosity and caution, and fear and hope. He realized that these tensions weren't problems. They were the way that spiritual growth happens. The Ethiopian texts characterize this insight as the emergence of moral consciousness, wherein the first human discerned the necessity to transcend immediate impulses, evaluate the long-term ramifications of actions, and pursue alignment with the divine order. This awakening was the basis for moral understanding and the beginning of human responsibility in the world. Adam also started to understand how everything is connected in his daily life. The earth, sky, animals, and other people were all part of a living, changing system that was guided by divine rules. Every decision he made, every lesson he taught, and every act of care or attention he gave helped to keep the balance of creation. His legacy therefore transcended individual development to include the nurturing of a spiritually conscious and ethically sensitive human community. The Ethiopian texts indicate that Adam's recognition of this interconnectedness served as a beacon of hope for humanity, reminding us that no individual exists in isolation and that every act of comprehension and virtue reverberates through generations. Adam's thoughts had an emotional and spiritual depth that still resonates today. The Ethiopian viewpoint prompts us to regard the first man not as an emblem of failure, but as a paradigm for education, development, and intentional existence. His journey shows that awareness, responsibility, and moral reflection are part of being human, and that even when things go wrong, people suffer or are forced to leave their homes, there is still a chance for wisdom, healing, and hope. His experiences encourage us to scrutinize our own decisions, contemplate the ramifications of our actions, and acknowledge the profound responsibility each individual bears in the ongoing narrative of existence. The tale of Adam post-Eden functions as a conduit between the cosmic and the individual. It reminds us that spiritual growth is not separate from our daily lives. Work, relationships, thinking, and making moral choices are all part of the same divine tapestry. We can learn from Adam's journey that growth is not about being passive or blindly following orders. It is about being involved and aware of what we are doing. In doing this, we start to understand how these old texts relate to our lives, how important choice is, and how awareness, responsibility, and connection can change us. Through the Ethiopian lens, Adam's legacy is one of hope, wisdom, and divine purpose. His journey teaches us that mistakes are not the end, but the beginning of understanding. It also teaches us that free will has weight and opportunity, and that every act of reflection, guidance, and moral engagement adds to the story of humanity. After Eden, his life serves as a model for spiritual awakening, a lesson in resilience, and a reminder that the path of understanding and growth is always open, even when things are hard. Adam's story pushes us to look beyond simple stories, to look deeper into our minds, and to accept the duties and opportunities that come with being human. When you look at the story of Adam through the Ethiopian texts, the difference with the Western Bible becomes clear. This shows how many layers of meaning are often missed in well-known stories. In the Western tradition, Adam is introduced in Eden as an innocent and largely unaware being who enters the garden with Eve to obey divine command, only to quickly face temptation that results in disobedience and exile. The focus is on the fall as a single failure that changes the course of history for all people. This interpretation is mostly about sin, guilt, and punishment. It sees Adam's life and the story of humanity as one of weakness and the need for redemption. This viewpoint often emphasizes human fallibility, ethical shortcomings, and the imperative of divine intervention to recover what has been forfeited. The Ethiopian texts, such as the Book of Jubilees and the Ethiopian Book of Adam and Eve, tell a story that adds to Adam's story in both time and spirit. In this version, Adam is already aware, thoughtful, and emotionally complex before Eden. His creation encompasses physical, spiritual, and cosmic dimensions. He possesses inherent knowledge and a sense of purpose from the beginning. The Western Bible often shows Adam as naive, but the Ethiopian tradition shows him as someone who can see the future and has moral strength, and who can understand and interact with divine laws in a meaningful way. This pre-Eden existence establishes a framework wherein Adam's experiences are cumulative, elucidating the context of his decisions and enhancing the reader's comprehension of his role in creation. People also have different ideas about what free will means. In the Western narrative, Adam's decision to eat from the forbidden tree is predominantly depicted as a failure, a violation of command with immediate repercussions. The Ethiopian texts, on the other hand, see the same event as an important step in a bigger spiritual education. Adam's choice signifies not only disobedience, but also the emergence of consciousness, the recognition of responsibility, and the initial confrontation with moral complexity. These texts imply that the fall is not merely a conclusion, but an essential phase in humanity's spiritual odyssey. It stresses that experience, not punishment, leads to growth, and that being aware and moral growth require dealing with the world and its problems. Another important difference is how Adam's friends are shown. The Western Bible introduces Eve as the only partner and focuses on her role in the fall. often portraying her as the one who disobeyed first. The Ethiopian texts, on the other hand, show Lilith as a companion before Eden, which shows how independent she is and how her choices cause problems. This addition adds a layer of relational and moral complexity, showing that Adam's early experiences are shaped by both divine instruction and the way people interact with each other. Lilith's presence underscores the human quest for autonomy, the complexities of interpersonal relationships, and the ramifications of decision-making. Even prior to the commencement of the garden's narrative, Eve's subsequent introduction enhances this, facilitating a continuum of moral and spiritual inquiry instead of a mere dichotomy of innocence and transgression. The Ethiopian view also offers a more complex spiritual ecosystem, with angels watching over things, cosmic witnesses, and divine communication that goes beyond direct orders. Adam interacts with these higher beings, learning from their advice, watching them, and putting them to the test. This is different from the Western Bible, where angels are only involved in a limited way, usually as messengers or enforcers of God's will. In the Ethiopian texts, angels act as teachers, watchers, and sometimes testers of Adam's moral judgment, which adds depth to the spiritual story. This framework helps readers understand that Adam's growth was a planned process, a journey of discovery, and a way to get ready for more responsibility in creation. The Ethiopian texts also stress that life before and after Eden is the same. Adam's experiences prior to entering the garden influence his actions therein, and his post-exile existence further develops the lessons previously acquired. The Western Bible, on the other hand, mostly keeps these stages apart, showing Eden as the beginning and exile as the end. The Ethiopian method tells a story with many layers, where Adam's life is a series of lessons, reflections, and moral growth. This continuity promotes the perspective that humanity possesses an intrinsic capacity for growth, indicating that spiritual development constitutes a continuous journey rather than a singular occurrence marked by failure. Different people also interpret the symbolic parts of each tradition in different ways. In the Western Bible, the forbidden fruit is often a warning sign that makes it clear what is right and wrong. In Ethiopian literature, the same symbol serves primarily as an instrument for spiritual enlightenment and ethical instruction. Eating the fruit is not just a sin, it is a conscious step toward understanding the balance between freedom and responsibility. This new way of looking at things shows that the story is meant to teach. Human mistakes are not a divine trap, but a necessary way to learn about truth, knowledge, and the complexities of life. The Ethiopian narrative also focuses more on Adam's emotional and mental state. The Ethiopian texts, on the other hand, look at Adam's inner life, including his fears, doubts, hopes, and thoughts. The Western Bible tends to focus on actions and their effects. The stories talk about how he thought about right and wrong, how he dealt with temptation, and how he learned about the world and his place in it. This makes Adam more human, which helps readers and viewers connect with him on an emotional level. Instead of seeing him as a distant archetypal figure, they see him as a real person going through the first moral and spiritual problems of humanity. Historically, these disparities illustrate the broader contexts in which the texts were conserved and disseminated. The Ethiopian Bible, with its larger canon and different ways of writing, gives us a view that is both old and culturally unique. It keeps stories that were left out or shortened in the Western canon, giving us different ways to think about creation, morality, and the spiritual journey of people. These texts show a theological framework that values prior knowledge, moral involvement, and the relationship between divine guidance and human responsibility. By comparing these traditions, we get a better understanding of Adam's story and a greater appreciation for the variety of ways the Bible can be understood and the depth of ancient spiritual thought. From a contemporary standpoint, this comparative analysis prompts contemplation on the influence of narratives on comprehension. The Western Bible's emphasis on sin and obedience highlights accountability and the repercussions of disobedience, characterizing human nature in terms of imperfection and salvation. In contrast, the Ethiopian texts focus on learning, spiritual growth, and gaining wisdom through experience. These viewpoints compel viewers to contemplate the responsibilities and possibilities embedded in human choice, to perceive errors not merely as failures, but as avenues for understanding, and to acknowledge that spiritual development frequently arises from confronting life's intricacies rather than evading them. Ultimately, analyzing Adam through both Ethiopian and Western perspectives transforms our comprehension of creation and humanity's role within it. The Western Bible gives us a warning and a moral framework, while the Ethiopian texts give us depth, continuity, and a more human spiritual experience. By looking into these differences, viewers are asked to think about their own decisions, awareness, and moral journeys. The Ethiopian viewpoint promotes a narrative positing that humanity's story commences with awareness, challenges, and education, implying that the inaugural human was not solely the first sinner, but the first conscious entity, traversing a realm of consequences, responsibilities, and opportunities for development. This comparative perspective also highlights the significance of context in the interpretation of sacred texts. Comprehending Adam's narrative within Ethiopian tradition offers novel perspectives on the essence of free will, the intent of divine guidance, and the function of consciousness in determining human fate. It questions what we think we know, pushes us to think about other ways to understand things, and makes us more interested in the spiritual and historical parts of creation. By looking at these stories next to each other, we can see Adam more clearly, not just as a figure of origin, but as a model for spiritual awareness, moral reflection, and the ongoing journey of people to understand the divine. Adam's story, and revealed through the Ethiopian texts, transcends ancient landscapes and timeless narratives. It resonates in the contemporary world, prompting contemplation of the choices, responsibilities, and spiritual development that characterize modern existence. When we think about Adam's life before Eden, his spiritual awareness, and the things he learned through hard times, temptation, and moral thinking, we realize that our own lives are shaped in the same way by the choices we make and the awareness we develop. Like Adam, who had to deal with moral dilemmas, moments of doubt, and the effects of his choices, modern people have to deal with a constant cycle of curiosity, responsibility, and consequence. These similarities make the old story feel real, important, and deeply human. The story makes it clear that knowledge and awareness are always linked to responsibility. Adam's journey teaches that figuring out what you want to do with your life isn't easy. It takes thought, bravery, and sometimes even risk. There is a lot of information, chances, and hard moral questions in the world today. The story of Adam before and after Eden reminds us that just being aware isn't enough. We also need to act in line with our values, with care, and with honesty. Every decision we make, whether it's about our relationships, our jobs, or our own growth, is important, just like Adam's choices changed the course of history. This lens encourages viewers to take a moment to think about their own choices and how they will affect them, their communities, and even future generations in the long run. In today's world, spiritual reflection is often hard because of all the distractions, the need for immediacy, and the desire for instant gratification. Adam's life after Eden, which was full of work, learning, and moral judgment, is like the slow, patient, and hard work of personal growth. The Ethiopian texts stress that making mistakes is a natural part of learning, that facing problems is a chance to learn more, and that spiritual growth comes from being involved in the world rather than avoiding it. This insight is especially powerful for people who live in the present. It implies that personal development, moral conduct, and spiritual consciousness are fostered through intentional actions, contemplation, and the readiness to face challenging decisions. Adam's story is not just a historical or religious account. It is also a guide for living with purpose and awareness. The emotional aspects of Adam's journey still have an impact today. His experiences of doubt, fear, hope, and discovery are things that everyone can relate to. People today can relate to the fear of making choices, the excitement of figuring out what you want to do with your life, and the uncertainty of starting over. The Ethiopian texts show that Adam's growth was linked to his relationships, especially with Lilith and Eve. This suggests that learning and moral growth depend on human connection, conversation, and shared experience. In modern terms, this means that mentoring, community, and being kind to others are all important for our own personal and spiritual growth. The story makes people think about how their relationships affect their moral choices and how learning together can help people take responsibility for their own actions. Additionally, the Ethiopian viewpoint on Adam contests traditional concepts of success, failure, and ethics. It depicts the first human not as a cautionary figure of disobedience, but as a sentient entity grappling with moral intricacies, acquiring knowledge from decisions, and evolving spiritually. This new way of looking at things is very relevant today because it promotes the idea that mistakes are chances to learn and challenges are chances to understand more deeply. In a world where judgment and perfectionism can be strong, Adam's story is a model of resilience, reflection, and hope. It shows that spiritual and moral growth is a lifelong process, not a one-time achievement. The story also makes it clear that all actions are related to each other. Adam's understanding that every decision has an effect on the world around us is similar to modern conversations about how people's actions affect society, the environment, and global systems. His story makes people think about how their choices affect other people, their jobs, and their social responsibilities. The Ethiopian texts imply that moral awareness entails perceiving beyond immediate repercussions to comprehend how actions integrate into a larger cosmic and ethical framework. This viewpoint can motivate contemporary audiences to act with deliberation, contemplate long-term consequences, and engage with life through a lens of accountability that transcends self-interest. Another modern lesson is how to combine spiritual awareness with everyday life. Adam's life after Eden was full of work, taking care of the environment, thinking about right and wrong, and building relationships. His spiritual development was inextricably linked to active participation in the world. Today, people can see this as a call to make sure that spiritual reflection is not separate from real-life duties by aligning inner awareness with outer action. The Ethiopian texts show that real wisdom isn't just knowing or understanding something. It's also doing the right thing every day in a way that is fair, consistent, and kind. This link between consciousness and behavior is a lesson that will never go out of style. It teaches people to balance what they think with what they do. While we think about what we can learn from Adam's story, we should also think about what it means for our spiritual lives as a whole. The Ethiopian texts depict a universe imbued with divine presence, moral order, and spiritual guidance. This way of looking at the world makes people think of their own lives as part of a bigger connected whole, where everyone's choices, intentions, and actions make up a shared moral and spiritual fabric. By recognizing the patterns of cause and effect, opportunity and consequence, and freedom and responsibility in Adam's life, modern audiences are invited to cultivate mindfulness, ethical discernment, and a deeper connection with both the divine and the human community. People who watch Adam's story are reminded that learning and growing are things that never stop. Spiritual growth isn't limited to old texts or past experiences. It's a living, changing journey that happens with every choice, every interaction, and every thought. The Ethiopian view of Adam promotes accepting complexity, dealing with uncertainty with moral clarity, and seeking wisdom through engagement rather than avoidance. This method fits well with today's focus on self-improvement, living ethically, and deep thinking, giving us a way to live mindfully in a world that is always changing. For those who are watching today, this story is more than just entertainment or a way to learn about history. It is a call to action and thought. Think about how your values affect the choices you make, how your relationships help you grow, and how problems can turn into chances to learn. Think about the moral problems Adam had to deal with and ask yourself what you can learn from them in your own life. Talk to others about what you've learned and how the story has changed your spiritual and moral point of view. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends to help us reach 10,000 subscribers as you read this story. Please think about sending a super thanks to help us out financially so we can make more content that uncovers hidden truths and ancient wisdom. Leave a comment below with your name and the city where you are watching. This will help you connect with other people who are interested in these ideas. The link in the description leads to the complete Bible in 88 books and the Book of Enoch in English. These books provide access to the texts that tell Adam's story in a rich and detailed way. We can see how these old stories are still relevant today by thinking about Adam's journey from before Eden to after Eden. They ask us to live life on purpose, take moral responsibility, and look for spiritual meaning in everything we do. Adam's story is more than just a story from the past. It is also a mirror for modern life that makes people curious, makes them think about ethics, and makes them feel connected to God, other people, and the ongoing journey of discovery and growth. What if the story of Adam didn't start in Eden? What if the first man, as the world has always been told, didn't simply appear when God breathed life into clay, but had a story that began before Genesis was ever written? These questions shake the very ground of everything we've been taught about creation. Because hidden deep within the ancient Ethiopian texts, far older and less altered than many Western scriptures, there are whispers of a man who existed in divine form before his body ever touched the earth. A man who was not just the beginning of humanity, but the memory of something far greater. Imagine that for a moment. Adam, not as the first human, but as a being of light shaped in the presence of celestial watchers, carrying a purpose that predated the world itself. The Western Bible begins with, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," but the Ethiopian texts hint at another layer, a spiritual realm that existed before this material one, where Adam's soul was already alive. In those sacred writings, creation wasn't sudden. It was intentional, layered, and filled with mystery. And that mystery might explain why humanity has always felt like it's searching for something it has forgotten. People today scroll endlessly through history, archaeology, and ancient myth videos, driven by a single hunger to know who we truly are and where we really came from. The Western story of Adam and Eve gives us a start, but only a surface. The Ethiopian texts go deeper. They describe divine councils, heavenly beings, and a pre-earth Adam who once stood among them. They describe light and matter, separating not once, but twice, first in the heavens, then on the earth. And somewhere in that divine unfolding, Adam's existence began. It's strange, isn't it? How every culture has a creation story, and yet they all seem to echo fragments of the same lost truth. What if those echoes point back to the same origin? An origin preserved not in Rome, not in London, but in the sacred mountains of Ethiopia. There the ancient Gaia's manuscripts, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the lesser-known texts like the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan reveal a side of creation most of the world has never been allowed to see. They speak of Adam before Eden, before the fall, before even time as we understand it began. These aren't just stories. They're testimonies from a forgotten era, records of a people who preserved what others erased. And what makes the Ethiopian Bible even more extraordinary is that it contains 88 books, not 66. That's 22 more writings that were removed from the Western canon centuries ago. Imagine how different our understanding of humanity might be if those missing books had never been silenced. In those extra pages lie clues of worlds before this one, of divine beings who shaped the first man, and of a creator who made Adam not just to live, but to remember. That's what this story is about, remembrance. The Ethiopian texts invite us to remember that creation wasn't random or simple, it was cosmic. Adam wasn't made in haste. He was formed from divine essence, crafted to reflect the Creator's glory and destined to carry light into the physical world. The Garden of Eden wasn't his beginning, it was his assignment. And what came before it was an existence so radiant, so powerful, that even the angels questioned it. This documentary will take you into that forgotten world. We'll journey through sacred writings that describe Adam's first awareness, the heavenly council that watched his creation, and the mystery of his pre-earthly form. You'll see how the Western Bible's opening words are only one side of a much larger story, one the Ethiopian priests and scholars have preserved for thousands of years. You'll learn how Adam's spirit, according to these texts, existed in God's presence long before the dust of Eden ever formed beneath his feet. And this isn't just theology, it's history that challenges everything we think we know. Because if Adam existed before Genesis, then creation itself didn't begin with earth. It began with a divine order, a world of light, sound, and spirit. In that higher realm, Adam was pure, unfallen, and aware of the Creator in ways the earthly man could only faintly remember. The fall, then, wasn't just about disobedience, it was about forgetting that divine origin. And perhaps, through these lost texts, humanity is being reminded of it once again. If you're watching this, you're part of that rediscovery. You're part of a growing community of people searching for truth beyond the edited pages of Western religion. The Ethiopian Bible is not just a book. It's a window into what was hidden, erased, or misunderstood. And if you want to go deeper, you can find the complete Ethiopian Bible, 88 books, and the Book of Enoch in English. Links are in the description below. Before we continue, take a moment to comment your name and city. Let's see how far this awakening reaches. From Addis Ababa to Atlanta, from Kingston to London, this is a global conversation. Hit that subscribe button, share this video, and help us reach 10,000 voices seeking ancient truth. Every super thanks you send helps keep this mission alive, bringing the world the stories that history tried to bury, because this is more than a documentary, it's a revelation. As you listen, remember, not everything begins where we think it does. The story of Adam, like the story of all creation, may have begun long before Eden ever existed. And by retracing his forgotten beginnings, through the words of the Ethiopian texts, we might just uncover something about ourselves, the divine spark that has always been waiting to be remembered. And so, our journey begins, not in a garden, but in eternity itself. Adam was alive in spirit before Eden, before the rivers of paradise flowed, or the stars were hung in the sky. He wasn't made of dust yet, and he wasn't tied to the earth yet. The Ethiopian texts say that this first man was a being who existed before creation as we know it, a spark of divine essence that was made in the presence of the Almighty. The Book of Jubilees and the Ethiopian Book of Adam and Eve talk about a mystery that Western teachings have long missed. Adam's life didn't start when he opened his eyes in the garden. It started long before that, in a place of divine light. These old texts say that creation is more than just making the physical world. It is the beginning of an eternal order. The heavens were not created before humanity. Instead, both were integral components of a divine plan that commenced in eternity. These Ethiopian scriptures say that God thought up Adam before the earth was even built. He was a heavenly image, a reflection of the Creator's glory, waiting for the moment when his essence would take shape in clay. This Adam before the world was pure, bright, and aware. He wasn't limited by time or body. He was fully aware of his place in the Creator's plan. This idea changes everything we thought we knew about how people started. The Western Bible starts the story with dust, breath, and a garden. God makes man, puts him among the trees, and gives him power over all of creation. The Ethiopian texts, on the other hand, say that this wasn't the start of something new. It was the continuation of something much older. Adam had already been chosen, given a purpose, and known in heaven. When God said, "Let us make man in our image," it wasn't a new idea. It was a memory of what had already happened. The book of Jubilees says that before Adam was made, God's angels saw his picture. They were told that this being would one day walk the earth and look like the Creator. Some were happy, while others wondered how a creature made of dust could be so glorious. The Ethiopian scholars say that this was the first sign of the heavenly rebellion. Beings of light were jealous of the fate of a man who had not yet been born. The Western texts talk about a war in heaven, but they don't say what caused it. The Ethiopian writings bring it closer to Adam, saying that even before he was made, his divine calling caused trouble among the angels in heaven. These holy texts do not depict Adam as a passive entity shaped by divine intervention. Rather, he is an aware, pre-existent soul. His spirit was in direct contact with God before he entered his earthly body. He knew what he had to do: connect the spiritual world with the physical world and bring the image of heaven into the real world. But that memory faded when his soul entered his body. The fall, as the Western Bible calls it, might not have been just disobedience. It was also forgetting where they came from. So think about how heavy Adam's first breath was. He wasn't a blank slate when he woke up in Eden, which was full of beauty. He could still hear echoes of the eternal place he had come from deep inside him. The Ethiopian book of Adam and Eve tells of times when Adam would cry and look up at the sky, missing the light he used to know. He could remember a time before time, when he stood in front of God without fear or temptation. That sadness, that longing for God, was the first sign that man was more than clay. It was the sound of eternity inside a body that would die. These writings show Adam as a real person who has feelings, conflicts, and awareness.